Baby, I got plans that are bigger Please be seated. We will begin momentarily. Thank you.
I've been up the basement. I said I've been up the basement. 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 Some, and we don't have a problem. People born to something, and it's all meant to solve. I've been under sun, get the fuck in the way, man. I've been under sun, I love something to say. Some, and we don't have a problem. People born to something, and it's all meant to solve. I've been under sun, get the fuck in the way, man. I've been under sun, I love something to say. Love me like it does, yeah. Ride me like it lover. Touch me on my waistline. I've been up the basement. Love me like it does, yeah. Ride me like it lover. Touch me on my waistline. I've been up the basement. I said I've been up the basement. 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 'Cause I was but it's something I used to, and I can tell by your face, no one's ever been rude to you, but I can tell your face that I can say anyone, and you can run today, but you didn't stay very long. Now it's like the world knows you, walking around like everybody should know you. I wanna be like we used to, but now you're worried 'cause audience we lose you. And I had no idea what that feeling could do to you. And I can tell you've changed by the people around you. I used to take the long way just so I could walk past your door. I used to wait outside, but I guess I won't anymore. I'm so tired of being alone. I'm so tired of on my own. Won't you help me, girl, just as soon as you can? People say that I found a way to make you say that you love me. Hey, baby, you didn't go for that. It's a natural fact that I wanna come back. Show me where it's at. Baby, I'm so tired of being alone. I'm so tired of alone. Won't you help me, girl, soon as you can?
On the morning you wake to the end of the world, take your body back to the kai, to the place our kupuna taught us life began. First pole, then coral, then slime, then a whole universe fitting into a space smaller than a grain of sand.
911, please, fire ambulance.
I just got an alert on my phone saying there was a ballistic missile inbound.
Yeah, we just got it too. As much as you know, that's how much we know.
Pacific Command has detected a missile threat to Hawaii. A missile may impact on land or sea within the next hour drive. This is not a drill. If you are indoors, stay indoors. If you are outdoors, seek immediate shelter in a building. Remain indoors well away from windows.
On the morning we wake to the end of the world, your vision will be 2020. So use it. And maybe just maybe, the world may not have to end again tomorrow.
Please welcome to the stage Josh Campbell, CEO of Claire Media, and David Kirkpatrick, founder and editor-in-chief of Techonomy.
You know, we've never seen that video. Did the world just end?
Yeah, it wasn't the most uplifting way to start an evening session, but that is an example of the VR experience that you can do at Big 3, brought to us for our friends from Games for Change. So please sign up. You'll be able to do the VR experience. So again, welcome. Exciting to start as an evening session. Usually we start a little earlier. Some of you part of the earlier round
Isn't this
table.
room nice too? That's very nice.
Hopefully everyone's warm enough.
I like it a lot.
I haven't yet thanked all of our partners. So really want to bring up and thank all of the people that made this event possible. Autodesk, EDF, US Steel, GAF Energy, IDA Ireland, Ritter Finn, Salesforce, Vanguard Charitable. Just a round of applause for our partners, because this is...
Don't forget these.
I'll get there.
Okay.
And then the great experience. You know, again, creating an event, many of you have been to many events, designing this overall experience. You'll be in this room for 3 days. We got to work with some great partners, Empire Entertainment, Court, and One Workplace. You know, the providers of this amazing furniture and designing this experience. You'll hear from Dave from One Workplace about how important that is, thinking about the environment, especially as we come back to work. What else do we have? T-shirts. We're big fans of our T-shirts. We've been doing T-shirts now for, I did look, this is our 10th year. So 10 years of T-shirts. Hopefully you grabbed a T-shirt when you registered. Aiden from Found Surface is here. You're going to grab one of the T-shirts.
You still wearing your T-shirt? Esther's wearing it.
The T-shirts, as we talk a lot about sustainability, the T-shirts are made half of recycled water bottles and half of recycled cotton. So amazing fabric to really.
The cotton's recycled too?
The cotton is recycled.
That I didn't know. Wow.
Yeah, Aiden's over there. And the bags are all from recycled cotton.
Made in Cleveland too, right? Yes.
Made in Cleveland. Thank you for that. Worth Books, you know, we launched an imprint with Simon & Schuster this year through Worth. Jonathan Merck from Forefront and Justin Batter here. You'll hear from some of our authors on Tuesday morning. When you get over to Big 3, hopefully after this session, some of the books are there. Anything else I have to mention? Games for Change, I did all that. I think that's it.
Okay.
What do you have to say about the session, the introduction? Oh, I guess we're supposed to do this too. Hashtag, handle at Techonomy. Hashtag Techonomy22, the Wi-Fi on the back of your badges if you haven't already connected, Techonomy Network, Tech22.
Use it, it was very expensive.
Yeah, it was. I was told bathrooms, we have to talk about bathrooms?
Oh yeah, we should, because they're actually not that close, unfortunately. You can use the bathrooms in the lobby of the hotel, which are just to the right and left of the front door, or you can use the bathroom in Big 3, which you just go out there and across the short little parking lot, and that's unfortunately the closest bathrooms.
Yeah.
So that's.
There's a bush. No, yeah.
There's a bush.
That's, yeah. And this is like a.
There's a bunch of bushes,
now.
really.
This is sort of like a comedy show.
What?
It's fun to start this at night.
At night, yeah, it is. It is. Josh is used to this context. He used to manage rock bands, so he likes like late night kind of thing.
Yeah. So, all right.
So can we start programming?
A113.
Can we do content now?
Yeah.
Okay. Aren't you supposed to go down?
No, not until we play the video.
Oh, okay. Well, as many of you, I'm sure, noticed, Maria Ressa was supposed to be here. She can't be here. She's going to explain why, and we have a video from her, which we are going to show right now.
Hello, everybody. I'm Maria Ressa. Man, I wish I could be there with you today. David, Andrew, my apologies. It just turned out that the timing didn't work because my legal team and I have to spend this weekend in particular working on the legal filing at the Supreme Court that's due this month, and which will basically determine whether I still have my freedom. I could go to jail for almost 7 years. This is only one of 7 criminal charges I'm facing now. I wish again that I could be there. And, you know, I talk a lot about, Andrew, your book from 2007, The Cult of the Amateur. We have learned so much more since then about the impact of the technology on our emotions and our brains, and the impact on society and the online harms, how online harms turn to real world harms. What I deal with, this weaponization of the law, or my lawyers call it lawfare. This is something else that I hope doesn't come to America, but the polarization of politics, the kind of addiction to the technology, all of these things we now share all around the world. I always say, if you want to know where you're going to go, look at where we are in the Philippines. I wish you all a fantastic weekend, a fantastic conference, and good luck to all of us. I'm Maria Ressa. Thank you.
She was referring, of course, to Andrew Keene, who was supposed to interview her here tonight, and he and I are going to do a thing on Tuesday. Where's Andrew? Over there, lounging on the sofa. Well, that's a pretty good video she sent, don't you think, Andrew? Yeah, and it even sort of sets up the next session. So I think you guys should just come on out, please. So am I supposed to make... Esther, did you notice that she mentioned addiction? Did you hear that?
I did, yes.
So let me do as good a job as I can properly introducing. All 3 of these people are very hard to introduce because they are so multifaceted and multi-talented, been doing so many great things for a long time. Vivian Ming, when I think of her, I think of, what year was it, 2016, 2015, when you interviewed Ray Kurzweil and roasted Ray Kurzweil?
Yeah, that was, well, it was the day before, wait, which one was this? I think that was the day of the presidential election.
Oh, so it was 2016 then? Yeah.
Trump had just been elected, and Ray and I talked about AI, and that was very amusing.
And you don't really agree with him. But she's a neuroscientist, a serial entrepreneur. What's your main project right now?
Right now, I've got a company working in Alzheimer's. I have another that has invented the first biomarker for postpartum depression, which we can also see through natural language processing. Those are probably 2 of my big passion areas right now, mashing up AI and brains and hopefully changing what it means to be dealing with these problems.
And that probably is very connected to some of the things you're going to tell us about. She's got a lot of research that's pertinent to this topic of human nature and how it can be an impediment or an aid to innovation and a successful society. John Hagel, is it The Journey Beyond Fear?
That's it.
That's your current book. And how many books have you written?
8.
This is his 8th book. I think I met you the very first time I went to Davos, which would have been 1998. I remember we hung out there. You've been just doing amazing things for so long, and you were at Deloitte Center for the Edge for many years. Now you're on your own, consulting and writing more books. But his thinking about fear is what he's going to start out our session tonight by talking about. And again, it's very deeply researched and very original thinking. Esther Dyson kind of is my role model for events like this, because when I first became a tech journalist, which was an awful long time ago, her conference Release 1.0 was that what the conference was called?
No, it was called PC Forum.
PC Forum, sorry. Your newsletter was Release 1.0. But it was the most important conference for the tech industry, really, and Bill Gates would always be there doing this, and that was before he kind of got trained, I guess. Yeah. But Esther was I remember Paul Allen used to put together a rock, sort of pickup rock band thing every time. And Esther really has been following the tech industry as a thinker, a journalist, and a participant and investor for many decades. But what's really notable about her, and more or less the most important thing for tonight, although that part of her history is going to come into play also, is for 8 years now, you've been doing something called Wellville, which is an intervention in, is it 4 or 5 places?
It's a project in 4 or 5 places. We don't like the word intervention.
Okay, whatever. We'll go, you explain it then.
Yeah, it's a 10-year nonprofit project focused on helping communities to build their own sustainable institutions. We don't give them fish. We don't even train them to fish, but we catalyze them building their own fishing schools.
But for really health defined very broadly.
Very broadly, yeah.
Physical health, community health, mental health, all of these things.
Economic health.
But you financed that pretty much entirely yourself. Can I say where you got the money?
Sure.
From stocks you had in Facebook.
And Square.
And Square, right.
Yeah. Got really lucky.
Which is especially ironic when you hear some of the things she's going to say tonight. So the thing,
but I sold it all. That was the point.
Well, that's good. But this is an amazing thing that someone like her has devoted so much of her time and focus to the communities that she works in are relatively disenfranchised communities in a variety of different parts of the United States, up northern Michigan, not too far from here in California. I don't know where the one's in. Where are the other two?
Spartanburg, South Carolina, and Clatsop County, Oregon, which is northwest of Portland, and North Hartford, Connecticut. North
Hartford, but that was the one you added, right. So the topic here is how human nature harnessing human nature to accelerate innovation. We were originally calling it how human nature impedes innovation, but we thought that was a little downer for after dinner. So it can be seen both ways, and I think all three of these thinkers see it both ways. And I want to start with John, who's really very methodically thought through one aspect of this, and tell us what you've discovered and concluded about fear.
Wow. Well, as context, I'll just say that I've done research for several decades now on the long-term forces that are reshaping global economy and society. And I believe we're in the early stages of what I call the big shift. I think it's played out for decades, but we still have much more to go. And it has many dimensions to it, but one of the dimensions is mounting performance pressure on all of us. As institutions and as individuals, pressure takes many different forms. Part of it is intensifying competition on a global scale, accelerating pace of change. Things we thought we could count on are no longer there. And because of all the connectivity we've created around the world, some small event in a faraway place in the world quickly cascades into an extreme disruptive event, leaving us scrambling. Any one of those would be a lot of pressure. The three together is pretty intense. And I've come to, based on the work that I've done, I've come to see that the result is a very natural human reaction. And that's the emotion of fear. I think that more and more people, and when I talk about fear here, I'm talking about fear of the future. When you look into the future, do you see primarily a threat or an opportunity? And I'm finding that more and more people are seeing the future as very threatening, scary, I don't want to go there. And while I think it's a very natural human reaction, and an understandable one, I think it's also a very limiting one. Fear basically shrinks our time horizons. It makes us much more risk averse. We trust erodes in other people. We become more isolated, and it can become a very vicious cycle. So I think if we're talking about, I rephrase this to unleashing human nature to accelerate innovation. If we're really going to unleash the human nature, we need to find a way to cultivate other emotions that will help us to move beyond the fear. And that's the subject of the new book that David mentioned, The Journey Beyond Fear. But again, based on research that I've done, I've come to believe the emotion that really is going to be most helpful to all of us is a very specific form of passion. We all use the word passion and have different meanings. Based on the work I've done, where I looked at environments where there's sustained extreme performance improvement, despite the diversity of those environments, all the participants had a very specific form of passion. I call it the passion of the explorer. But basically, it's a long-term commitment and excitement about having increasing impact in a domain. We're driven to have more and more impact, whatever it takes. We also get excited by challenges. If we have this passion of the explorer, we seek those challenges because it's going to help us to have more impact. And a passion of the explorer, their first reaction when confronting a challenge is, who else can I connect with who can help me get to a better answer faster and have even more impact? They're extremely well connected. So I think it's a very powerful emotion. And the people who have this passion of the explorer, one of the examples I use is big wave surfers. You talk to a big wave surfer who's paddling out to ride the next wave, they're afraid. They know that people have died. They don't just fall off the board, they've died on those waves, but they're still paddling because they're so excited about the opportunity. And so I think it's something that, I'm not talking about eliminating fear, but it's cultivating emotion that will help us to move forward in spite of the fear and have even more impact that's meaningful to us. And the pushback that I get from a lot of people is, come on, John, some of us are capable of passion, but most of us just want to be told what to do and have the safety of an income. My response to that is, let's go to a playground and look at children 5 or 6 years old. Show me one that isn't really curious and passionate about exploring and coming together with others to explore. We all had that passion as a young child. What happened? We went to school, and we were taught that passion is something you do on the playground or at home, but when you're in school, you just listen to the teacher memorize and show that you memorized. And it was to prepare us for the work environment. And I think one of the keys to unleashing this passion in all of us is creating environments that will encourage that passion and support that passion. I'm going to generalize, but at least I've worked with a lot of large institutions around the world. Passion is deeply suspect in most large institutions. Passionate people ask too many questions. They take too many risks. They deviate from the script. We want people who do their assigned task reliably and efficiently and get it done. I believe that builds fear, and that the institutions we have are actually intensifying the fear that we're experiencing as human beings. And what we need to do is create environments where there will be the opportunity to really develop that passion. I'll just quickly mention one thing in terms of shifting and encouraging this passion. I believe in the big shift, the leaders of the past, or of today actually, are those who have the answers to all the questions. No matter what the question is, you can count on the leader to have an answer. And if they don't, maybe it's time to get a new leader. I believe the leaders of the future in this big shift are going to be those who have the most powerful questions, and who will freely admit they don't have an answer and ask for help. Say, can you help me? It sends an entirely different message to the organization that questions are not only okay, they are essential. And asking for help is essential. And so I think that there's a huge opportunity here, and I just want to end. I started with the big shift and mounting performance pressure. I love paradox, and one of the paradoxes of the big shift is that at the same time it's creating mounting performance pressure, it is creating exponentially expanding opportunity. We can create far more value with far less resource, far more quickly than was ever imaginable in the past. So I believe that we need to really recognize the role of emotions in unleashing human nature and find ways to move beyond fear into passion of the explorer.
you mind if I add a little story onto that?
Please.
For several years in a row, PwC had asked me to come in and do this sort of future of work sort of wargaming exercise with their up-and-coming junior execs plus their clients. So big pool, global population of these execs coming in, and I didn't really put the wargaming materials together, and so I would agree with them. They'd show up and they'd say, it's so obvious, like there were these 3 options as a scenario, and then 3 options we're supposed to choose from, and maybe A or B, but no one's going to choose C. You'd have to be, you know, Satan. What kind of person would choose C? And then we run the little wargaming session, and we'd add stakes. And the stakes was simply make your choice in front of everyone else. Every single person made the choice they themselves said was morally wrong. And the only thing that was different was first they told me in private, and then we made them disclose in public. And I mean, if these are potential up-and-coming leaders and they're too scared to say what they truly think in front of their peers, that's very concerning.
And I should mention, you know, one of the pushbacks I get too is, come on, John, I haven't heard many people expressing fear. And my response is, we live in cultures where expressing fear is a sign of weakness. So we don't want to express fear even to ourselves, much less to anyone else, but we find other emotions to express our fear. I believe the anger we're seeing increasingly around the world, if you probe underneath, it's driven by fear. So.
Okay, well, that was pretty good. And we're going to come to Vivian last, but I want to, both Esther and Vivian, I hope you can feel free to respond to what comes before. Esther, having been in tech all those years, and now having spent all this time in truly stressed American communities, has come to some new thinking about addiction. So tell us what that is.
Yeah, and I'll start, the first time I kind of noticed it was alcohol in Russia when I was there in 1989 for the first time, and then many times thereafter. And it was interesting. The women were much better off. They had children to take care of. They had a purpose. They took, honestly, their husband's worthless money and turned it into real goods. In a price-controlled economy, you'd always rather have something than the money because it costs less than it was worth. So I talked to one Russian friend of mine and said, you shouldn't smoke and drink so much. It's going to kill you. And he said, well, you know, here in Russia, we don't really want to live that long anyway. And that was interesting. So fast forward, Angus Deaton, Deaths of Despair. I was starting to look at these communities that had basically lost their middle class. There were some nice, well-off folks with assets and capacity, and then a lot of poor people. Sometimes there were black poor people, sometimes there were natives before the Americans came, sometimes Hispanics, but sort of that middle class grounding had disappeared along with many of the jobs. And our goal was initially health, because that's much more politically acceptable than things like income redistribution or whatever. But health is a fundamental asset of human beings. Without it, they can't do all the other stuff. And at the end, I'm going to give you a solution, but meanwhile, I started noticing addiction, and then there was the internet and Facebook, and I thought, wow, that's a really clever metaphor. This stuff is addictive. And then I realized, So here's what I think about addiction, and I'd love to come back to this later, but David asked us to be brief. Addiction is not about pleasure. It can start through pleasurable experiences like going out and getting drunk, or eating really good, delicious food that evolution has made us love, even though now too much of it is not good for us. But addiction is like everything else. It's not you are or you aren't. it builds on itself. And addiction is fundamentally craving for relief from something that you have now become addicted to, and that relief never persists because it's short-term relief. It's a disease of short-term thinking in a sense, the marshmallow stories, all that. But it's also a disease of constrained thinking. You stop, the thing that you're craving makes you forget about your family, your ethics, and probably one of the best ways to define addiction is you crave something, you get that temporary relief, and then you feel guilty, you realize it didn't work, you wish you hadn't done it, and it creates a more and more damaging cycle, whether it's gambling or whatever. When I was working in these small communities, I've found a couple of other things in addition to Facebook, David, that were addictive. And one is short-term grants are addictive. In a community where 3 or 4 little community orgs, they each spend $10,000 to hire a grant writer to get a grant of $50,000. So the net to the economy is $10K at best if the $50,000 grant is spent well. Meanwhile, it creates competition among these small organizations that should actually be collaborating. And at the end, when the grant runs out, okay, we did the science training for the 8-year-olds. Now we need to do something new and innovative instead of the same old project. And so again, you get no sustainability. And that word sustainability applies to so much more than bridges and climate. I mean, most of all, it applies to human beings. And the other really visible example right now is private equity and more venture capitalists. They're addicted not to profits, but to sales, to exits. And again, they want more and more, and the limited partners want more and more. And you can never, I mean, we've seen it with SoftBank, and then you have the whole FTX. We're confusing value with valuation. And that valuation, that quick hit, that, oh my gosh, he's worth $4 billion, he's worth $42 billion, oops, he's worth nothing. That's what addiction is. And it's a spreading way of thinking. It's a spreading thought behavior pattern that is destroying a lot of our society. It's certainly destroying a lot of our kids. And now the question is, how do we deal with that? And in the communities, we help them build their own sustainable institutions that are focused on children and child care and building an environment where it's even more important to train young brains than it is to train AIs. Train them to feel secure, train them to think long term, train them to have purpose, train them to appreciate being loved, which is even more important than loving, to be needed, to be worth something to other people. In society at large, I think we actually have a really exciting opportunity over the next few election cycles to start talking about the sustainability of humans and investing. So instead of renting your health from an absentee landlord, which is fundamentally what so many of us are doing both individually and as a society, invest in it, create an asset that will then be producing income in the form of health as you age for the society as a whole. And my next few years, once Wellville is over, is going to be devoted to trying to get the government to think of budgeting the way a business does, with capital spending, with investment. There's legal constraints on the government doing that, believe it or not. All they can do is spend in terms of how they do their budgeting. But we need to start focusing on health and human capital as a collective investment, not as something attributable only to individuals.
And I know when you went into these communities, you told them you were going to be here for 10 years. You were not going to just, grant and run, right? You really got involved, and you promised to stay involved.
I love what you said. Unfortunately, originally it was 5 years.
Okay.
And
well, that's good.
Because I did not want to promise more than I could deliver. After 2 or 3 years, I realized both that my Square and Facebook stock were doing really well, and that I was willing to spend the 10 years, and my team was cohesive enough that we could. So we extended it to 10 years, and we are now delivering on that at the end of 2024. But we're like parents. You know, we want the communities to own it, to do it for themselves, and they will. But we're parents. We're not going to walk away. It's just we're going to stop paying for their apartment.
You're sort of modeling what you're talking about, doing that.
Yeah.
The one other thing I want you to make sure you mention now is you said something interesting to me about a very trendy conception in tech, gamification. Talk about that.
It's a really interesting question because, so what makes addiction so prevalent in the business community? It's monetizable. That's a great word. And gamification is kind of some of the essence of addiction. You play, you win, you lose. It's slightly unpredictable, which somehow makes it more addictive. And I mean, this is a question to which I don't know the answer. Doing inventory management is really boring, and it's a job that some people do. If you gamify it, how can you gamify it so that it's exciting? Because I could, believe me, give me a good designer, I could actually make a game called Inventory Management.
I think they do sort of gamify it in Amazon warehouses, as a matter of fact.
And so
I'm not joking.
Yeah, no, that I mean, my Oura Ring is. It's sort of embarrassing to admit. I actually brought my charger with me so that I like to charge it when I'm sitting down because I don't want to waste steps while my ring is being charged.
Oh, so you are a victim of this very phenomenon.
Yes. Except, I mean, there's games that are harmless, and then there are games that become addictive. Like if I never walked except, you know, there are things, again, it's partly things you do that you regret. I swim every day. In some sense, I'm addicted to it, but I don't regret it. It's, you know, I'm older probably, I hope, than most of you think I am. And I'm still alive.
So it appears, yeah.
Yeah, but it's, some things should be gamified and some need to be, again, it's that difference between excitement and long-term value, the purpose. The opposite of addiction is not sitting still in a room, not doing stuff, not drinking or snorting or whatever. It's being out with your family. It's helping your kids do their homework. It's doing something where you're of value to other people.
Yeah, this is really tying into some macro themes that already came up this afternoon.
Yeah.
And I want to go to Vivienne, but I just want to mention I think in all three of the prep calls, you mentioned a few things, but TikTok, I think, came up in all three calls, which we don't even have to comment on right now, but feel free. So Vivienne, I think a lot of what both John and Esther have said dovetails very well with your research about information overload, information addiction, perhaps, or I don't know. What have you found about information and TikTok and such?
I have to say, just because I always hate to pass up a chance to interact with either of them, that there's two very different contexts in which you just brought up. We could imagine, for example, gamifying. You could show up for your inventory management job, and the music could start up, do 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 do, and you go and you have to squash mushrooms with the boxes that you're moving around the warehouse. I mean, you could gamify that. One would presume not a lot of people have intrinsic or endogenous motivation to move boxes around in a warehouse and keep track of them, although I imagine some of us might be better at it than others.
AR glasses would be good for this.
Very much so. It's the Pokemon Go, but for human misery. So, but courage is a very different thing. Our ability to want to explore. That not only should be, but it has to be endogenously motivated. That has to be something that comes from inside you. You gamify that, and then the game becomes the motivator. And what you try, and you can see that so clearly in formal education and beyond, where it's so easy to train people out of this incredibly powerful, uniquely human value add into the world. And that's not unrelated to what I'm going to talk about. So I said I've started a couple of companies because I like building cyborgs and hopefully for good. But my day job is running a philanthropic lab, and people bring me problems. And sometimes it's big companies. So at the start of the pandemic, Amazon and Facebook reached out and said, we're sending everyone home. We've never done this before. How do we do it? What do we do? But also, how do we innovate and how to be inclusive? So it's the innovation thing that is going to lead to what I'm going to talk about. And watching, with the help of the kind of data I had available through that relationship, watching people interact online in real time. I'm not supposed to say this publicly, but the pandemic was great. It gave me all of our lives passed through these digital pipes, and I could measure all of it. It was wonderful. We need more of these. So I got to look at all these people interacting, and we were seeing these really interesting trends, which I'm about to reveal. But before I do, a paper came out during this period of time. It only came out about a year ago, and has the very unusual title of slowed canonical progress in large fields of science. What they found by doing something you can kind of only do today, which is take an AI and have it actually go read every paper that gets published and look for new ideas and novelty and methods and all these different ways that scientists, whose job is innovation, at least in theory, could be coming up with new ideas. But then they looked at the result of that, and this really interesting thing happened, which, by the way, I'm seeing in my own data, which is as more and more papers came out within a field of science, if it passed a certain threshold, then innovation within the field slowed down. This isn't to say no one was coming up with new ideas, but those new ideas were dying on the vine. So the existing highly cited papers become even more cited, non-linearly increasing as the number of papers increases. The existing high-profile researchers also see huge increases in their citation rates. New papers are much less likely to get cited. New ideas are much less likely to break in and become a part of the field. And when they do, there's this interesting phenomenon that it's not a slow, gradual accumulation of attention. It just goes from zero to bam, everybody starts citing this paper out of nowhere. Okay, well, maybe just scientists suck in the modern world. With all the digital information available, maybe we do a bad job of handling it. But then I remembered there was this paper from a few years ago looking at the same thing in music. As more and more music came out, then the dominant songs got all of the listens, the dominant artists got all the listens, new songs were rarely getting listened to by new artists, and when they did, they had these sudden changes, nonlinear boosts, in which suddenly you went from being nobody to somebody. And so I was really interested in this strange, seemingly paradoxical phenomenon, which is when there's more and more information, there's less and less exploration. Even if it's literally your job to explore, we were doing it less. So popular culture or science. So what about other domains or just general behavior? So in my work, I started looking at people interacting in innovation contexts, and we'd actually put together little prediction markets. Have people figure out, what do you think the price of oil will be in 2023? What's going to happen next in the war? Who will win this election? All of these things. And what you saw was the more densely people were connected together, the more friends they had on Facebook or Twitter followers, the more they relied on Google for their information searches. It isn't one technology. It's all of this dense connectivity in our lives. The more they stopped exploring and just herded around the same safe ideas of the other people around them. And so we've all kind of talked about some scary and some hopeful things. So I got really interested in what breaks this behavior. And I could go deep into it because I love getting nerdy about this stuff, but one of the things we saw is changing incentives. So prediction market is just a market. People have money they can spend on their predictions, and if their prediction comes true, they share in the profits of that prediction. And yet, it induced people to herd around safe areas. If you ask the individual participants, do you really think you explored all of the ideas? They say, oh, I mean, not all of them, but 80, 90%. And you'd show them, actually, you didn't explore any more than 30%. In fact, almost nobody did. And when then you add everyone together, you found that because they herded around the same safe answers, the entire community only explored about 30% of the possible possibilities. So what if we change it? We'll do something called a minority opinion. This is like Minority Report. So here, we're going to run it like a market. You make your predictions, you invest your money, but you only get a payout if you were right, but the majority was wrong. And that one tiny change induced people to explore. And if they didn't have a new idea, it induced them to find other people that did and try. But here's an intervention that was equally successful, but even more seemingly paradoxical, because here we're allowing people the same access to each other. We're just changing what the incentives were. In this case, it was a big online course, 30,000 students all taking this course together, and they weren't performing as well as the university expected them to. And it didn't make any sense, because they were in this big course, they had access to all their peers, 30,000 peers that could all help, the best, smartest kids in America, all taking the same class together. And we did this little intervention. We broke this course of 30,000 students up into little cohorts of 5 to 10 students, randomly, completely at random. Same course material, same lectures, same tests, same exams. They performed dramatically better. They had access to less information. Now they could only talk in the little chats with 7 other students. But somehow 7 actually got them to explore more than 30, where as soon as the crowd settled on an idea, they were done, and people stopped looking. So courage, it turns out, is in some ways something we actually get from being exposed to the unknown on a regular basis. And so much of what Esther was talking about, to me also as someone that struggled with eating addictions, that these are things that we don't appreciate, that it feels so great to be part of this big community that Facebook and others allow us to be, that having Google makes us better. But actually, this is my final example, and this wasn't my work. Someone was looking at AI tutors for students and found that the AI that explained the problem and then gave you the answer, and the students performed really well when they had the AI's help, and then learned nothing afterwards during testing. So then they tried an AI that explained the problem, waited for the student to generate answers, and then the AI gave you the answer. And even though the students did the generation on their own, again, they didn't learn anything. And it was only the case where the AI tutor only explained the problem and never provided correct answers, that the students performed better with its support, but also learned and were able to provide information later. Again, somewhat paradoxically, information's taken away, connections, opportunity, technology, and the human being performed better. So I'll take a pause there.
Okay, that's interesting. I have an idea. I'm going to take a little chance here. Who in the audience would do me the favor of trying to summarize what all 3 of these have in common?
Well,
I know that Vivian could do it, but I'd love to, if anybody in the audience has just sort of thought, wow, there's certain things that, I mean, they're awfully similar, right? I mean, everybody's too sated with dessert to do this.
All right, no one wants to show their courage after the
I knew it was taking a chance. Okay.
But give them a reward.
Okay, gamified. But you, Vivian, you do me a favor. Try some. What do you see, in this fear, addiction, information addiction kind of? What do you see as a common element here?
The element that pops out to me most readily, because I'm self-interested in this, is my research, is that many of the things we're talking about, slipping, even if you don't perceive yourself as being afraid, not being courageous and slipping back into it. When you find comfort, and I know exactly what you're talking about, finding comfort in an addiction, any kind of addiction, and in a lot of the work I've looked at, is it's people, in a sense, not going deep. Being the easiest technology to build is the one that scratches that immediate itch. It's the
You mean
one
like
that's
crypto?
right there. Well, if only it did anything.
It wasn't that easy to build, but it's very easy to talk about.
Yeah, I've never seen a solution more desperately in search of a problem to solve. So
thank you.
It's for me, it comes back to this again. It becomes so easy. For example, in education, giving a lecture out to people versus what you just did, which is asking people questions, step up, answer, can you tell me? So what sometimes is called active versus passive learning. Students vastly prefer passive learning. Frankly, many teachers do as well.
This audience apparently does also.
Yes, and it's not just that they prefer it because it's less challenging, they genuinely believe they've learned more. But it turns out it's exactly the opposite. They learn much more in an active learning context, but they don't want it. When it comes to cognitive aging, there's this wonderful recent study that looked at, one of the big challenges as you age is you become more sedentary, and that's strongly associated with cognitive decline. But not all sedentary experiences are the same. So you have some people that passively stream or watch television, and others that go online and explore. And they have much better cognitive outcomes than the ones that passively consume. And even though in John's case, we're talking about notional leaders and probably potentially an elite group of people, but it should be everybody, we still have people that have, through the very education system you described, learned to be passive, learned to be satisfied with that itch getting scratched, rather than be willing to really put themselves out there. So I think there's probably a lot of connections you could find, but that's being shallow versus being deep is one of the commonalities I'm feeling across all of
Yes, Esther.
So I'd love to add to this actually one thing about questions and one thing about fear. When I was in Clatsop County this last week, we had a session of, believe it or not, 40 people or so, where each one was asked, what is your role here? And there were a lot of community members, and they were advocating for whatever. And I said, my role is to ask questions. And not so much because I want to hear the answers, but because it's to provoke the people to whom I ask the questions to answer for themselves. And that is how we see our role, as we were talking about earlier, not teaching people, but helping them to learn. As for fear, so I run again and again into people who are scared to think about what it is they're scared of, because the kind of the concreteness of the thing, they're sure it's just like they don't want to go there. They'd rather have a dark corner than shine a light on it. And in particular, I was on the board of 23andMe, and people would, oh no, I don't really want to see the numbers. It was almost as if...
I'm like that.
Yeah. And do you in your little brain, your little animal brain, secretly think that if you add them all up, you have a 400% chance of dying?
Of Alzheimer's, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, the way to overcome fear is to, okay, so imagine, I tripped and I broke my leg, or, I don't know, I was in some of all this crime that's happening everywhere and my leg got shot off, or, so either I would be dead, or I would be alive enough that if it was really terrible, I could kill myself. I mean, it's hard to imagine many fates worse than death. And I always used to think, well, I really don't want a nuclear holocaust, but if there is one, and I'm still alive, there's going to be a lot of work to do, and I'm going to feel pretty useful. And it's sort of funny, but it's also very, very real if you actually think about the things you're most scared of and do a real scenario. There's always going to be an option B or C or D, whatever it is. It may be horrible, but you'll have a choice.
This is pretty heady stuff for late at night, I realize.
Yeah, and it's one.
But how about questions? Does anybody have questions or comments of any type? They don't have to even be intelligent. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Sureel Desai.
Oh, wait for the mic. Sorry, I should have told you that before.
Hi, my name is Sureel Desai. I'm from Bombay, India. I'm a lawyer and a documentary filmmaker. What is the opposite of fear? You know, I mean, what is the opposite of addiction? Is connection. You know, when you feel connected, all your addictions just disappear, you know? I mean, if you're connected, and right now we live in a world which is tremendously connected. You know, I mean, there has never been a point in history where 3 billion people could communicate with each other. And in spite of that, we have these inherent fears. You know, it's like you have programmers in Bangalore who connect more with programmers in the Silicon Valley than they connect with their own people in their own country. And this connectivity and this connection over ideas, over, you know, and I feel that connection is not just, you know, being digitally connected, but mentally connected, mentally stimulated, you know, like you connect your first, and when it comes to blockchain and stuff like that, I mean, it's just going to enhance the connectivity, you know, and that's all I wanted to say.
So the interesting challenge there is, and there's lots of stuff, but the interesting challenge there is it turns out
Gabrielle?
Humans, we make very different choices. So this idea of heterogeneity, it's so wrong when anyone talks about the average person. There is no such being on the planet. But it's very heterogeneous. So I'm not making a statement about all people, but what I am saying, and what I think many of us have commented on here, is there is this ideal world of, can you imagine what would happen if we could connect 3 billion people together? And it turns out for some people that connection is wonderful, for other people it's terrible. And it's been a much more complex reality than the idealized statement. What could crypto do? What could social networks do? Those are wonderful things for science fiction writers to write about. What do they actually do with real people who interact with them? And I'll end with this. One of the things that excites me most now about reading any science paper is finding those rare papers that don't just report the average finding, but the one that says, here's the subpopulation of people that didn't fit our model, that were just off out of nowhere. And you mentioned TikTok earlier. It can get a lot of negative attention right now, but there are two interesting populations of kids on TikTok. They're both minorities, but they're there. One is a group of kids that aren't on it at all, even though their peers are. And another is a population of kids that are on it all the time and are doing creative work and don't show many of the negative effects you see in other populations of kids. Understanding them. Why is it that they can be in the same place, deeply connected in the same ways, and they have those idealized outcomes? They look like who we wish we were when we were on TikTok or Facebook. And the reason they so interest me is we could all be those people. If we could figure out some of the educational aspects and the social, I genuinely believe some of us, more than are currently there, could be that idealized selves, truly making use of these systems. But again, the kind of original title of this is, so why don't we? Why is this so hard for us to do?
You know, John, one of the things you talk about, and I want to hear from Dave, but is connection in small groups. right? Just quickly talk about why you think that makes so much difference.
Yeah, what I've found, again, I've done a lot of research around this notion of the passion of the explorer, and one of the elements in people who have this passion is they connect together in small groups. I call them impact groups, but it's anywhere between 3 to 15 people at most. And they form deep trust-based relationships with each other, and they share a commitment to having more and more impact in a particular area. So on the one side, they're supporting each other. If you run into unexpected problems, we're there, we have your back. And at the same time, they're constantly challenging each other. Why can't we have even more impact? But they're challenging out of respect and a mutual commitment to have more impact versus trying to put the other person down. So it's a key, I think, and it reinforces the passion. It reinforces the excitement about having more impact.
And just on the side of, what are some good things that can be done, that we could do, that we could think differently about in order to sort of surmount some of these issues. I just want to summarize 2 things you said to me. One was that people seem to do best when they, even with TikTok, where they spend an hour really into it, but then they really step back and do something else. Go deep and then come up or meditate, whatever. You had a lot of ways of talking about it, but that never keep doing one thing. And that goes to the addiction, right? This was a key point you made. And the other point you made was that you really found that there were cases in innovation groups when if you cut off access to information, innovation actually increased.
Yeah, I mean, that was super clear. When we looked at people interacting in Google Docs or Dropbox, and we could see them in real-time interacting, they almost always were more innovative, came up with more novel ideas when a variety of things happened. One, we saw clear turn-taking between the individuals participating, so even if one was a Nobel Prize winner and the other's an undergrad, they were taking equitable turns at being the leader of the project when their relative expertise came to bear. But the other was that they would take time to break apart and find information independently on their own, come together, and talk it through and work new ideas together. And then also at a more macro level than that, that team would cut itself off from other teams, explore a problem by themselves before going and talking to others. So we saw this ideation and eventually a communication, but in between a real maturation process of new ideas.
Dave.
So,
tell us who you are.
Dave Morgan, Simul Media. I didn't respond right away when you said what was the general theme we heard.
I know you could do it, though.
I know, but I was trying to think of it, and then I realized what I thought I heard was you all said, how is it we can get people to do what they know is they want to do is the right thing to do and not be caught up in the emotion or the crowd or the addictive nature of something else that's causing them to take away from it. Like, do what we know is right. And I think, and I'm actually, it's a bit counter to what, before being connected to everybody, because I think one of the challenges sometimes, what we're seeing in politics or other thing, is that the crowd pulls you further sometimes than the smaller community or the smaller team. I've always found as an entrepreneur that I always want people that were captains of team sports, not individual athletes. They suck. They do their own thing. But if you find the balance of a person, if you read Marcus Aurelius or someone, and you're like every day fighting this discipline, we all fight it. How do we know we're going to do the right thing for the right reason and not because our emotions tell us the other way or because the crowd pulls us a different way? And I think that's the challenge. It's not a new technology thing. It's a constant human thing. But because we have more interactions with others, it makes it more complicated.
Okay, I'm being told, hands are up. Caitlin, what do I do? People want to say something. Can we do a little bit more? We can't. We cannot? No, Josh says we cannot. Those people, you can blame Josh. It's too long. Oh, we've got to go because I guess the crew has to be released, etc. But I want to just make a comment that strikes me. We're facing this moment where Twitter might dissolve. Yes. right? It's very relevant to this discussion, it seems to me, particularly the things you were talking about. And you know, a lot of people have been asking lately, would the world be better or worse without Twitter? And you know, you've been assuming, oh, it would be way worse because it's so necessary for this and that. And but maybe this sort of makes me think I'm not so worried about what the screw up Elon Musk is making right now.
Well, I am. I mean, Jeff Bezos treats his employees like robots, and Elon Musk treats them like playthings.
Yeah.
And these guys are still heroes, and that disturbs me.
Okay, we got to end. Thank you for your patience late at night and your open-mindedness. And we'll be back here in the morning. Do I have to say something? Wait a minute. Hold on.
No, so
6 a.m.
What am I?
7:30, we have breakfast in the session, room Kenwood A and B. We have a session on ESG and ethical investing, as well as a session on the metaverse. If any of you have any more energy and gas in you, Big 3 right around the corner will be there. Late night, wine, VR experience. Please join us over there. And then we'll see you at breakfast at 7:30 a.m. So
thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
I can see clearly now the rain is gone. I can see all obstacles in my way. Gone are the dark clouds that had me blind. It's gonna be a bright, 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 sunshiny day. It's gonna be a bright, 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 sunshiny day. I think I can make it now. The pain is gone. All of the bad feelings have disappeared. Here is that rainbow I've been praying for. It's gonna be a bright, 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 sunshiny day.
Please join us now for wine and activities in the Big 3 Lounge, located behind the pavilion. Thank you.
I wanna follow where she goes. I think about her and she knows it. I wanna let it take control. 'Cause every time that she gets close, yeah, she pulls me in enough to keep me guessing. And maybe I should stop and start confessing. Confessing, yeah. Oh, I've been shaking. I love it when you go crazy. You take all my inhibitions. Baby, there's nothing holding me back. You take me places that tear up my reputation. Manipulate my decisions. Baby, there's nothing holding me back. There's nothing holding me back. There's nothing holding me back. She says that she's never afraid. Just picture everybody naked. She really doesn't like to wait. Not really into hesitation. Pulls me in enough to keep me guessing. Oh, and maybe I should stop and start confessing. Confessing, yeah. Oh, I've been shaking. I love it when you go crazy. You take all my inhibitions. Baby, there's nothing holding me back. You take me places that tear up my reputation. Manipulate my decisions. Baby, there's nothing holding me back. too far. I know we'd be alright. I know we would be alright if you were by my side. And we stumbled in the dark. I know we'd be alright. I know we would be alright. 'Cause if we lost our minds and we took it way too far, I know we'd be alright. I know we would be alright if you were by my side. We stumbled in the dark. I know we'd be alright. We would be alright. Oh, I've been shaking. I love it when you go crazy. You take all my inhibitions. Baby, there's nothing holding me back. You take me places that tear up my reputation, manipulate my decisions. Baby, there's nothing holding me back. Oh, oh, oh. There's nothing holding me back. I feel so free when you're with me, baby. Baby, there's nothing holding me back.
Thank you for joining us this evening. You may now please join us for wine and activities in Big 3 Lounge, located behind the pavilion. Thank you.
I'd be thrilled. I never ever look at myself. Sorry.
No, I was going to say there was a good quote that someone said. You were talking about time or whatever. Someone said, I thought by now I'd be driving a flight of plane, and all I got was 120 characters. Right?
Yeah, forget self-driving. I got a flying cars. Fly self flying cars.
When I watched the Jetsons, I really thought that stuff was going to happen.
Interesting discussion.
Although I will say this,